Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Brian Savoy. I am one of approximately 5,000 account holders who've been detrimentally impacted by Maryland 529's board decisions that breached our contracts. Bills sponsored by Delegate Forbes and Senator Benson have been introduced to spin down Maryland 529's board and the prepaid college trust. This is a positive development, and we're extremely grateful. However, the full scope of the malfeasance and mismanagement has not yet come out. Every day that this entity is allowed to exist continues to do harm to thousands of children and their families. As an example, Maryland 529 reported to us just yesterday that tax forms that we received this past month to file our taxes are wrong. They didn't apologize. They simply said that they might get those fixed sometime. They also sent out a long, inaccurate email that completely ignored what our contracts promised us. Since the inception of our contracts, Maryland 529 guaranteed that they would pay tuition and mandatory fees, or through a rollover or refund provision, our principal plus 100% of investment earnings. Maryland 529 changed our contract in June 2021 and told 31,000 of us that the contract change benefited us. Their servicer, Intuition, believed that it benefited us. Their actuaries, GRS, believed the change benefited us all. Even former staff members reported in formal correspondence that the change benefited us. Account holders' independent financial advisors thought this change benefited the consumers. Maryland 529's current management team are attempting a nefarious devaluation of our accounts, and doing so is a brazen breach of contract. You have heard from account holders and you have heard from official representatives from Maryland 529, but the people who we've been trying to hear from are members of the staff who witnessed these actions in person. Today, we are here to listen to Spencer Fell. Spencer Fell worked for Maryland 529 for 16 years, outlasting 5 CEOs and 5 CFOs. He says he was the agency's longest employee and unofficial historian. He and the other members of his staff lost their jobs in 2021 when Maryland 529 hired a Florida vendor, Intuition, to manage the program. Among other roles, Spencer worked as a customer service manager for Maryland 529, a role for which he received commendation from the Maryland 529 board. He trained customer service representatives on the nature of these plans. For many of you, Spencer was the voice on the phone who explained to you how the plan worked. Spencer will share why he is here today, and then we'll take questions. And again, a reminder on the ground rules. If you have a question, please raise your hand electronically using Zoom. I'll maintain a queue in the chat and we'll call on you accordingly. And if you have follow-ups when you do ask a question, please type follow-up in the chat so that I can modify the queue accordingly. I think with that, I will turn this over to Spencer. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you to everybody that took the time to attend. I just wanted to really quick explain why I came forward. I actually left the agency. My job was due to disappear along with my entire customer service team due to this change to the vendor. But part of the reason I left was actually in anticipation of these 2021 changes that I warned my then supervisor, a former CFO, director of finance, had stepped down, that these changes would have a grave negative impact on the customers. Not only did I not agree with it, but as the new enrollment specialist from 2005 to 2015, prior to my promotion, I talked to hundreds, maybe even thousands of interested and concerned prospective account holders about what would happen if tuition didn't increase. What would happen if my child did not go to a degree accredited school? What would happen if I moved to Virginia? And I stressed in exactly what was in the disclosure statement, that if you want to roll it over to another qualified tuition program, such as our partner program, the Maryland College Investment Plan, or any any 529 in the nation, that you could do so without any tax penalty. And clearly in the articles, it said that we would calculate the value based on the amount of money that the account holder paid into the plan minus the administrative fees. And since we're investing everyone's money in one big mutual fund, what's called a comprehensive investment plan, they would be entitled to 100% of whatever the earnings losses in total would be. And that was not only a great tool for the customer in terms of convenience and security, it's also something that we've been doing since the beginning of time, to just cut that back to this ridiculous calculation is preposterous. I don't really have any other words. It is literally like pulling the rug out from under someone. And to be honest with all of you, I was very much on the fence about coming forward. I still have friends in the state government. Nobody likes a rat, but at the same time, I've been following along this group that Brian created and seeing all of these concerns and just reading about all these 11 months to get your money out. That's unheard of. In my wildest dreams, I would have never imagined anything like this could happen. And I've been so racked with guilt that I figured, even though I no longer work for the agency, I would step forward. And I've seen a lot of misinformation in the news media and in the group itself in terms of how the money's invested, how the program works. So I figured I could step forward. Now, when I saw the email that was sent March 2nd by the board to the account holders, any shred of doubt about coming forward disappeared. First of all, I worked for the program, as mentioned, for 16 years. I'm very familiar with their contracts. I'm a college graduate. I had to read that at least 10 times to try to even have a base understanding of what they were talking about. So how is the average consumer going to understand any of that? This business of contributions versus balances, and the audacity to say that they're making this change because the legislative auditors told them to do so. That's absolute nonsense. And to take away the ability to have 100% of the overall decent earnings we've accrued and replace it with some calculation involving a minimum benefit is, I have no words. I have absolutely no words. The other reason I came forward again is most important is that I feel that the agency has lost sight of the board's mission statements. It's had its ups and downs, but it's always been a solid program. At this point, I feel that it's gone completely off the rails to treat the customers like this and cheat them out of the benefits that have been in the written disclosure statements since 1998 to 2021 is just beyond unfair. So my main goal is for the people in this group and all Maryland 529 account holders to get exactly what they deserve, what they've been promised, and the premise of why they've invested this. This is no different than agreeing to a mortgage or an auto loan, and then halfway through the term, having the finance company or the bank say, oh, by the way, that interest rate and payment that you agreed to, well, we've just decided to double the interest and double the payment. And, if you look at the very back of the document you signed, there's a blurb that says we reserve the right to make changes at any time. And I know that's the foundation of these changes, but to make a change to go into effect immediately that affects all investors from 1998 to present retroactively is, it's just, I would never have worked a day at this program if I thought there was even a 1% chance of something like this happening. I just am racked with guilt that I was even a part of this organization for so long, and that they could not only do this, but put a spin on it to make it sound like they're doing a favor to their account holders by taking such a drastic and adverse measure on their finances.
Thank you, Spencer. I think at this point, do you want to open it up to questions?
I'm up for questions, absolutely.
Okay, great. I think, Lisa, do you want to join in and help out facilitate this portion as well?
Sure. Do we have anyone in the queue yet who wants to ask a question?
So we have Jessica Calfati.
Okay, great. Jessica is from the Baltimore Banner. So let's hear from Jessica and then I'll jump back in.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for taking time today. So Spencer, I have a question for you about the statement that was sent out by the board yesterday and sort of how to interpret that. Because if you take the board statement at face value that, what they're now explaining is correct, they're saying we want to start applying the 6% earnings for balances held on November 1st, 2021. And that they never intended for the 6% earnings to be calculated back to the beginning of those accounts. But what I realized is, let's say you opened your account on October 1st, 2021, and you pay for 8 semesters in full, you then are getting 6% monthly compounded moving forward, which is the opposite of what they said was their intention. So in effect, if you are one of those, in that sort of narrow group of having paid in full just before they made this change, and you now have 20 future years of earnings to accrue before your kid goes to college, isn't that exactly what they are at the same time saying they did not intend, the type of benefit that they did not intend to give to all of the families that are sort of on the opposite end of that, where they are, at the 20-year mark, their kid is about to go to college, and the board is saying, oh, no, that's not what we intended. Like, how do you make sense of that?
I honestly, I'm still struggling a little bit with it. Honestly, it's been a little over a year since I last donned my 529 cap. But again, I'm a little bit puzzled, but I will tell you that the issue that we're speaking of mainly affects account holders such as in the free air interest now Maryland529 group, and those that have been invested in the plan for quite some time. Those are the ones I'm concerned about. If someone wanted to invest today, I would be 100% on the agency side, is that whatever the terms are in that disclosure statement would apply. However, the concern are people like Lisa and Brian and the other 700 and some odd members, and a lot of the account holders that don't even know. I mean, we actually have a lot of what I call silent account holders that just put the money in and trust it'll be there when it's time for their beneficiary to go to college. It may not even have any idea what's going on with their money. But the mainstream of this is the account holders that have invested between 1998 and well prior to 2021, who actually have beneficiaries that are either in college or in high school and getting ready to make some decisions about their higher learning. And that is definitely in the tens of thousands. Those are the people that I would be more the advocate, because they invested based on the clear understanding that should they need to move their money for whatever reason, whether it's due to minimal increases in tuition or greater flexibility, that they would be able to get that calculation. You look at our annual reports, you'll see that the plan investment wise has done very well. And that's what those rollover earnings are based on. It's based on our investment performance. Part of the issue here, and this is honestly no fault of the agency, is that tuition increases were very minimal and investment earnings were tremendous, which meant that we actually had been reporting that we had an actuarial surplus. So I don't think the issue should be that they are broke or they can't afford it. It's the question is, what happened to these decades of great earnings and that are currently sitting in this fund, and why are they not going to be made available to all of the current account holders when they were made available to every account holder in the past? The only answer that I got from management was very dismissive. It was that, well, just because we did it that way in the past doesn't mean it was correct, and that we like legally have the right to change it. And I said, well, I'm not sure about that because I'm not an attorney, but I do know that morally this is incredibly wrong, and it just doesn't make sense. I don't see how this benefits anyone other than the agency itself.
One follow-up question for you, and then a separate question for Brian. Do you have any suspicion that maybe they are broke? That the, account mismanagement extends to just how much money is in the account, and perhaps they, make this shift, everybody gets 6% in earnings and they're like, oh my goodness, we actually don't have any money, we have to undo it?
Well, in my personal experience, I've come from a background where I've worked for private businesses that honestly, there was some doubt as to what was going on. I never had that doubt with the Maryland 529 because they were audited. They had an actuarial surplus or deficit that they reported. I mean, it is possible, but I never suspected that there was ever any theft or anything fraudulent going on. I mean, I'm going by what I was told, but they used to do an evaluation based on whether we had an actuarial surplus or a deficit. And I do remember when I had joined, there were some issues with the deficit surplus based on 9/11 and the issues that affected all investments, nationwide in the early 2000s. But since I joined, I never had any suspicions. I was always told that, we always check to see how many account holders we have and what our projected liabilities were. And unless I was being completely misled, I was always told that we're in great standing, that if push came to shove and everybody was in a situation where they needed to get their money out, that we would be covered. So I was going by that. However, now, based on all of these shady and sudden changes, I'm honestly not sure. And I truthfully, as someone that's worked with the agency for so long, I'm not really buying what I'm hearing about this only being a couple of hundred accounts affected. It wouldn't take 11 months to free up people's distributions and figure out what the problem was. I think that I'm not sure if it's a shortage of money or an issue that's way more serious than they're alluding to, but the facts that I'm looking at don't make sense with the speeches, with little speeches that we're hearing from the current Maryland 529 administration. So I don't know if that's the case, but I do think that the problem is much larger than they're admitting to.
Thank you. And then one question for Brian, and then I'll go back on mute. You mentioned the bill at the top of your introduction, the new legislation, and notably absent from the bill is funding to make you all whole, to sort of revert back to the 2021 year-end statements. And what do you think about the absence of a provision on that? And are you going to lobby for lawmakers to take action?
Well, I think that, we've been hearing about the nature and structure of the bill for a little bit of time right now. And, I think one of the things that that the intention of the leadership in Annapolis is for parents to be made whole. But one of the things that we've heard is that in order to do that, first, we need to begin the process of spinning down the prepaid college trust. So, I think one of the things that parents in our group are going to be doing tomorrow is looking through that bill seriously, line by line. It's a 52-page bill, and suggesting amendments. I think some of the amendments that we're going to be looking to suggest is, getting parents on board for those bills is going to take some trust. Okay. And I think one of the things that that I want to make sure that we see is that that there are some amendments there that, effectively, reinforce that there's trust on both sides. Okay. So some of the amendments that I could see us suggesting would be measures that help ensure that parents' rights are protected through this. That there is a provision in there that allows the treasurer to issue a percentage of interest or earnings as part of this. Okay, and I think that piece needs to be acted on expeditiously, and so encouraging and adding some type of timeline in there. Okay, we've already missed two tuition periods. The next one that's going to come up is in August of this year. And while that seems like that's quite a ways away, the transition from, if this bill passes, the transition from this being managed as an independent agency to being managed by the Treasury is not going to happen until June. So there's only going to be about 2 months to get action in place to do this. So, either whether that action is through the working group, whether it's through some type of transition group, we need to encourage that the work that's needed to make sure that parents are paid out for that August cycle and for all the time before that happens immediately using the emergency basis that is underlying this bill.
And one follow-up question to that. Does anyone yet know what the dollar figure would be to restore all of the account balances, or rather the FAFSA numbers that were shown on the 2021 year-end statements? Like if the legislature were to write a check, it's a check for what amount?
So, Jessica, that's a hard number to come up with. And I think that's something that we've asked Maryland529, and it's a question that they haven't answered. But my back of the napkin math has the range for restoration for 5,000 accounts at between $300 and $500 million.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Dan, I think we have a question from Danielle Douglas from the Washington Post.
Hi, guys. Thanks so much for doing this. A question to Spencer. When you inquired about the changes that were coming to the plans, what kind of explanation or rationale were the higher ups giving as to why they weren't going to be applying the rate from the inception? Or was it your understanding that they would be? I'm just trying to make sense of the very stark differences in what the plan is saying now and the insistence and like rigid insistence that parents just didn't understand their contract. What were you told and what did you understand from that?
Very little and very little, honestly. I mean, one of the big points of contention going back to way before I started was customer service and internal and external communications. That actually is something that I studied and tried really hard to improve. And even former Treasurer Kopp personally thanked me and my team for finally getting the avalanche of complaints from not getting resolution to the Treasurer's office. But we were never fully successful in our mission. In fact, one of my employees was like, why can't they even give us a copy of the correspondence that they're sending the account holders? They were notorious for sending out these mass mailings. And then customers would call in and, we're like, what exactly are you talking about? How embarrassing that is to ask a customer to read or fax you a copy of a letter that your own office sent out. And we're not talking about we're talking about one office, one floor. It was more like, well, the board and the upper management made this decision, and that's all you really need to know is what it is. You don't really need to know why. You just need to tell the customers this is the way it is. So it was very it just was very vague, and we've had issues like this before where big changes have come out and we weren't really kept abreast. So honestly, I did question it, and I was just told that previous administrations were doing things incorrectly, and it's their job to start doing things correctly. That was basically the only guidance that I was given regarding like any of these sweeping changes.
Okay, I think Rebecca Pryor is next.
Hi, so my question is similar. I'm not sure if you'll be able to shed light on this, but I guess it's just still very confusing. That new calculation that went into effect on November 2021 with the additional interest, are you able at all to shed light on, the backdating of that interest that led to those 2021 account statements that parents saw and that they made financial decisions on? Do you know if that was actually a math mistake or a technical error like the agency has been saying, or was it really a policy that they passed on purpose and then now they're trying to walk back?
Honestly, Rebecca, I think it's a little bit of both. I knew in advance, I'm not an IT person, but I knew that when you're transferring approximately 28 to 30 some thousand data sets of all unique account data to a completely foreign operating system in another state, to a company that is managing several other states' prepaid programs, I kind of knew, without being an IT person, that that was going to create a big headache. And they spent, rather than just trying to find a replacement operating system so that the 8 people, myself included, could keep their jobs and keep things in-house and allow customers to actually communicate directly with the office sending the checks, they claim that from 2017 to present, they were unable to find another operating system to house our accounts, and that the only alternative was to outsource a non-Maryland company to manage it. Assuming that's true, and I find that, as a consumer, hard to believe, assuming that's true and that they had no choice but to eliminate all these positions and outsource a company that knew nothing about our system or struggles, I knew there was going to be problems. So honestly, there may be some truth in that. Some of the holdup might be that the new system is just, we all know how computers can get. I mean, sometimes there could just be, a capital letter in a password and it won't let you log in. So it could be a one-off in the system. But again, the fact that it's 11 months, as a customer service person that got screamed at for a benefit being a few weeks late, I cannot imagine the outrage and the frustration of people that have waited 11 months. Everyone has different financial situations. It may not impact some as much as others, but it shouldn't matter. People should not be held up for that long. And there are a lot of people that invested their extra money, their tax refunds, their retirements in this, in the assurance that they wouldn't have any troubles using it. So that's certainly a big concern that I don't feel like they're putting the urgency in fixing. I know back when I was there, we were able to write manual checks when there was a system outage, and there has to be some way of fixing it. What the holdup exactly is, honestly, I don't know. But again, there could be some truth to this, transfer being, part of the holdup, but it's still no excuse for 11 months, though.
Well, and you talk about the lack of urgency, they went months without saying anything. When did the agency catch what they're calling this calculation error? Was it really in the spring of 2022, or was it before that when the change went into effect in 2021?
Well, I actually left a little bit before the transition, but I did keep in touch with some, people that I became friends with, who just mentioned that there was a lot of issues, and they had a lot of very educated, knowledgeable people in the ways of IT and finance, doing this transition, but no one had really been with the agency that long. And I'm really not 100% sure what happened, but it looked to me like a setup for failure. I don't know who in their right mind would think that this would have been a seamless transition that wouldn't have had any negative impact on the account holders, especially when you're getting rid of the people that dealt with these issues on a day-to-day basis.
So if I could just ask one more question really quickly, who, in your opinion, deserves to be accountable for, this mess, and what needs to be done to rectify the situation, in your
It's
opinion?
my personal and professional opinion that the current board and the current leadership are doing an abysmal job of handling this. But in all fairness, the current executive director stepped, if this was the Titanic, he became the captain of this ship after it hit the iceberg. Honestly, it was the people that secretly and quietly left, the former executive director, my former CFO. They're the ones that spearheaded this move to Florida. They're the ones that spearheaded these incredibly negative changes. And unfortunately, the new board members and the new leadership, some of them have only been there a matter of months. Again, they're the ones in charge now. They're the ones that are drawing a salary. They're the ones that are, accountable. But honestly, I really don't think they have any idea what they're doing, or any level of the mess that they walked into. And sadly, the people that really created this have just stepped out of the limelight, and of course they're not going to take any responsibility for it because they're no longer with the agency.
You okay, Rebecca?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you. And thank you for setting this up and speaking with us.
Oh, my
Um,
pleasure.
Before we get to Asia, just, I want to interject one thing, Spencer. Do you think that the current administration and the previous administration understood how this process worked?
No, honestly, no. And I think that's a problem when you're hired from the top up. I mean, I've been from, my background, usually you have to start at the bottom and work your way up. When you get hired on as a director, even if you have state government experience, even if you have investment experience, when you are educated to a level where you just don't feel it's really necessary to talk to the people in the trenches and learn the basics about how things work. That's one of the things I tried to do to make Maryland 529 a better place. I was the first one to set up any kind of a training program. They didn't even have any. And I think that a lot of people figure that their degrees and life experiences are all they need. And it's a very complicated program. I mean, my average call, granted, you can tell I like to talk, but just to go over all the facts and possible issues and nuances, my average new enrollment call would be anywhere from 30 minutes to 45 minutes just to explain the basics of the program. It's incredibly complicated, and to just jump in and make these sweeping changes without really understanding the impact, without talking to any of the, like for instance, this group has a lot of great ideas. They communicate. I don't think any of that really happened. I think a lot of these decisions were made with one goal in mind, which is just protecting themselves and the agency. The missions, about this being for the customer's benefit, have been, completely ignored, and that's very unfortunate.
Asia, you're up.
Hi, thank you so much, Lisa. I'm Asia from WAMU. Also, thank you guys for putting this together. I know everyone's going to say that, but we do appreciate it. One of my questions, I have like a couple, is kind of like backtracking a little bit from when you were talking initially, Spencer, like about how before they introduced, right, the 6% increase, like the changes that like when there were bonus funds, like that could be distributed to account holders. Could you explain a little bit about like what that looked like back then before the changes?
Sure, those are actually two different things. They, and again, the 6% was just some number they pulled out of a hat after I had left. Again, it used to be a variable based on our earnings, which for a lot of times well exceeded 6%. But if you're speaking of what they call this actuarial surplus and this rebate or bonus that they were supposed to give back, this was something that came about even prior to the big changes in 2015. And every time there was a vote as to whether to give customers or account holders rebates due to the fact that we not only were exceeding our earnings goals, but tuition increases were so minimal that a vast majority of our participants were really only getting back their principal payments, sort of like a Christmas club where you save money and all you're getting back is the money you saved. It's like one common thread I heard a lot was that I might as well just put this money under my mattress for all the growth that it had. I don't know why the boards in the past never approved that. The only rationale or excuse I was given is that, well, yeah, we're doing great now, but you never know what's going to happen in the future. So better to just kind of hang on to it for a rainy day. This wouldn't have been a huge amount of money, but anything's better than nothing. And as an advocate of the customer, I was always disappointed, but that was the answer that I was given. We just decided that, let's just hang on to it. Who knows when we'll need it.
Thank you for clarifying. And I think another question I have, which Spencer, you may be able to answer, but also maybe this is more so for Brian and Lisa. Because I know we were talking about like none of us are legal experts in here, unless somebody is, please chime in. But something I think also I'm curious about is just like the legal responsibility, like to Maryland 529 and the barriers that may be faced as far as like introducing legislation, since if Maryland 529 isn't technically, I'm putting air quotes here, doing anything illegal, which may have also contributed to why it lasted so long. And so I'm curious, Brian and Lisa, if you guys are interested in trying to pursue legal analysis or like think that there may be a case there as well.
I'll
Yeah,
let you, please, answer that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to address that. So, I think that, Asia, I think that parents, and I can speak for myself, but also just based on the knowledge of, I know that that there are other parents that are doing the same thing. No option has been taken off the table. Okay. And that, I've talked with lawyers, other individuals have talked with lawyers. I think that there are probably 6 or 7 legal groups out there that are ready and willing to help when the time comes. I think what we're doing in the process we're going through right now is, there are, 760 of us that are really hoping that that the state will do the right thing. I think that we're seeing the right movements from the legislature. I think we're seeing, excellent moves from the treasurer, from the governor himself on this. I think the question is that can we resolve this without legal action? Have we done some legal analysis? Sure, informally. But, do we have any legal expertise on this call that could, we could muster in order to answer that exact question as far as the legal basis on this? No, I think our hope is that that the moral authority that is vested within, the state government is what is the driving factor here. We were promised certain things. The state in the form of Maryland529 has let us down. This is an opportunity for the state to make it right.
And one thing is fiduciary responsibility, and under Maryland law, the board member's fiduciary responsibility, the first thing in the law is solely to the participants in the trust. And maybe Spencer can talk a little bit about this, about were they more concerned about the participants, the account holders, or were they concerned about just growing the trust bigger and bigger?
Honestly, my take on that is, and again, I wouldn't have been there 16 years if I thought there was anything nefarious or legal going on, that it really was all about the customer. And I think that when we started having all that turnover and everyone having, different ideas about the direction of the program, things started getting a little convoluted. And it, honestly, the missions that they list on the website, I don't really think they were ever really truly adhered to, in terms of, providing the level of service. And I can definitely say that at least since like 2017 and beyond, basically the treasurer stepped in 2015 after the big management change and set us up for success. And then once the treasurer's office went back to the treasurers and they had all new management directors, it was a different cycle of problems. Yes, we improved customer service. We hired more people. We got rid of some paper. We cut back on the mailings. We became more efficient, but I don't know what was going on behind the closed doors. And now that I'm seeing these changes, not only are they incredibly adverse to the account holder, but the way they're being marketed as being favorable, I just cannot believe that they're trying to spin this as that they were told to do this and that this is a positive change. Who wants to get back less money? I mean, that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. So at least, I mean, honestly, the last couple of years, it's been very much an anti-customer type of thing. I always, in the back of my mind, wondered, are they trying to make a case for dissolving this program or just having just the college investment plan? I always, in the back of my mind, seemed to think that they really were no longer not only concerned about not growing the plan, it almost seemed like they were not putting a focus on enrollments. All of the advertisements were for the Maryland College Investment Plan and the Save for College state contribution program. People on my team were like, are we even going to have an enrollment period? Do we even care? I mean, we used to every week we used to have a meeting to talk about how many new customer enrollments we had and how we were compared to last year. That all kind of went out the window a few years ago. So I definitely think, if anything, the focus was on not having any more new people join, which was sort of a red flag as far as my longevity there.
Okay, Katie Barlow.
Hi, folks. Thanks for doing this. I have a few questions, both for Spencer and Brian. Spencer, I'll start with you, and I think this is getting at some of the conversation we've had earlier, but when there was that transition to intuition, is it your sense that, well, first of all, who was providing or what was providing the input of the data to the third party? Was that a human? Was that a program? Was that hybrid?
There was a outside vendor, I believe. I was sort of used in the capacity of a historian, but not very much with this transition. I'm not 100% sure about this, because this was all more so on the like the IT, finance, technical side, not on the customer service, marketing side. But I believe that they had hired perhaps either some individuals or maybe even an outside, company to try to help manage this transition. I know it was a tremendous amount of work to figure out, first of all, how to do it, and then to actually do it. And I know there were a considerable amount of hiccups. So I don't know the exact figure of how much they spent on doing it, or whether they hired just some individuals or an actual company, but I know there was quite a lot of work that went into it. In my opinion, again, a lot more work than it would have taken to have just found a suitable system to replace the one we were using and keep everything in-house.
Yeah, I'm more trying to get a sense of intuition is saying that their program, that this is not on them, and that they followed what was given to them and gave an output based on that. And so is it the general sense that it is the input of the data that is the beginning of the problem, whether that was human, programmatic, error, whoever, that it's that moment of inputting the data to intuition is the issue? Is that your sense?
I'm not 100% on that one, really. I mean, what I'm reading from their communications is that it is intuition's fault, but historically that's always been the case. Whenever there's been an issue with our checks getting out, it's the post office fault. When there's a problem processing, it's the bank's fault. If it's a problem with our system, it's T. Rowe Price's fault. They've never taken accountability for anything. They've always blamed someone else. So if intuition is saying it's not on them and it's something to do with Maryland529, I'd be more willing to believe intuition that either they were not given the proper information, or something about either the formula versus the information sent didn't match up. I'm not really sure where the disconnect is, but I do know that 11 months is 10 months past being an acceptable turnaround time to fix the situation, especially if it's only impacting several hundred accounts as they're reporting.
Got it. And I may have missed this in the beginning, but remind me of your process in leaving. Were you removed from the company? Did you step away? What was that?
I stepped away. I was, along with my team, told that there would be an incentive to stick it out until the end of October. But with the disgust and the upcoming changes, I just decided I just could not make it that long. I just morally could not be there another day. And that's pretty much when I resigned.
Got it. Okay, and then questions for Brian and or Lisa. Looking at the statement they put out yesterday and the number of accounts that have been manually reviewed at this point, is it accurate to say that once an account has been manually reviewed, it's accessible and no longer frozen, even if not yet an accurate reflection of the number that it had in November 2021?
No, that's not an accurate
Okay.
reflection. So what here's what's happened is that we've received these these manual calculations, but even if somebody was going to accept it, and I have not spoken to one person yet who's received a manual calculation who is not disputing that manual calculation in one way or the other. There may be somebody out there, but I haven't spoken to them yet. So even so, even that minimum amount, that small amount. So in my case, we're probably talking about, a couple of $1,000s versus $22,000 or $23,000. That has not been restored to my account in any way. There has not been a date promised for the restoration of that value anywhere. So there's no real way for people to take advantage of even that amount. You didn't ask this part of the question, Katie, but we did talk about that. We don't agree with those minimum calculation values. Well, Maryland 529 stepped into this manual calculation process without developing a dispute resolution process either. So, I asked that question a couple of weeks ago of the executive director and was told, well, we're working on developing a dispute, a dispute process, an appeals process, but we don't have that yet. It's still coming. And so again, I know it seems like we are constantly harping on the mismanagement of this program, but that's just another instance of that.
Got it. That's helpful. Do we have a sense of how many are frozen as of right now?
So, as far as the earnings piece of this, we're still talking about 31,000 accounts. Okay. The provision in our contracts that Maryland 529 is operating under right now in order to freeze the payout of earnings, it allows the board to do so for reasons of actuarial soundness for a year, not more than that time. Okay, so we're quickly approaching that year deadline, but we haven't heard anything from the board. There was nothing in that March update about how they're going to go through a process of unfreezing earnings.
And to Lisa's point about the fiduciary obligations of the board, which can be, legally cognizable claims, of course, if there are, they're not adhering to those responsibilities. What is better about the proposal in the bill with the treasurer? Is it that the treasurer is politically accountable and that is perceived as more beneficial now than the fiduciary obligations that would be owed by a board? Is that preferred to a new board? Why is the treasurer idea, rising to the top?
I can't speak for the legislature on this. I think that there may be a overall, my perception on this, and so these are just my words. I think that there may be a lack of trust in the agency. I think that there is a feeling that the treasurer would be a more appropriate place for this, and that there would be more oversight and accountability inside of that office, where oversight and accountability can be more direct than it can with an independent state agency.
And last question, does anyone here have access to the state's contract with Intuition?
I do not.
I have the RFP, but not the contract.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Jessica, you have another question?
Yes, thank you so much. Spencer, I wanted to follow up on what you had said sort of at the top of your remarks, that you warned your supervisors that the changes being made would have a grave negative impact on customers. And I wanted to see if you could just explain again what you meant by that. Was it that the, deletion of the customer service team you were worried about, moving to Intuition in general, or you had awareness at that time of what these, earnings policy changes would mean, and you were saying this is no good?
Well, I'm certainly not a fortune teller, but what I was really warning about, honestly, was this, exactly what's going on right now. Unhappy account holders, people that feel like they've been misled, people that feel like they're being significantly shortchanged out of what they were promised. I mean, a lot of these people in this group have value statements, from 2021 that showed significantly more money than these current manual calculations are showing. It just seemed like what would happen is board members and actuaries and senior management would get together. They would discuss these changes, and they would just in their own minds feel that, okay, this will work, legally we're covered to do this, and we're just going to go ahead and send out the mailer and not really realize the impact. And I made it very clear that this was not going to go over well. And then to actually see it in writing yesterday and to have them sell this as a benefit, it just, I really don't have, as much as I talk, I really just don't have any words to just express how upset I am over this. And part of the reason, actually the main reason I'm here again, is because of just my guilt of having ever been involved with this agency and all the people that I talked to, that I assured nothing like this would ever happen.
So when you first learned about the changes to the disclosure statement in, summer/fall 2021, you interpreted that as this is going to be bad for account holders.
Oh, yeah.
And then by end of year, it actually is sort of looking like it's going to be good for account holders because, they're seeing these new year-end statements with higher balances. But you're saying your interpretation from the beginning was that this change is going to be worse for them than the way that it had been.
Absolutely. No matter, how you try to spin it. Again, if you look at our aggregate, earnings and, look at what the values were, calculating them the way we've been calculating them since day one compared to this, minimum benefit equation, and people are getting significantly less. So, my question is, why are they doing this? How can they do this? And where is that, extra money going to go? If tuition increases have been so incredibly minimal under the O'Malley and Hogan administration, and people are not, seeing the benefits based on the higher tuition, the only option would be to roll the value of that fund over to another 529, and now that's being taken away as well. I don't, unless the stock market completely implodes and we start showing significantly negative rates of returns on our investment, I don't see any way or shape that this could possibly be a benefit to anyone other than the agency itself.
Mm-hmm. Brian and Lisa, when you first learned about these changes, were you thinking this is going to be good for my account or bad for my account?
When we got the emails about the 6%,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like a good thing. It was, sold as a good thing. I had never really went back and looked at the annual reports to see what the actual trust returns were. In fact, I've since done that, and over the course of my accounts, I actually should have gotten, if I rolled it over, 7.8% trust returns. So I think that's where Spencer's coming from. He knew what the real trust returns were. So an insider would know what you're only giving them 6%. But, most parents, like, we didn't look at, you buy it when your kid's little, and you're not going to look at it, for 10, 15 years. And then when it comes time to look at it, you think, oh, they're going to give me 6% from inception. That's not a bad deal.
Mm-hmm.
I had we also have a regular 529, and it wasn't earning 6% from inception in the investment account we put it in. So 6% seemed okay.
Right.
I don't know about you, Brian, but did you read it that way too?
Yeah, I read it in much the similar way. I remember clearly receiving a mailing in August of 2021, and the nature of that August 2021 letter was very much, this is a good thing for you. Okay, that we're that the fund's been doing well, we're returning extra earnings, and I compared the old rate to the new rate, and I was like, oh, it looks like they're changing the rollover benefit, but they're trying to make the benefits better for everybody. People who are going in state, doing traditional distributions, will now be able to receive these excess benefits that they never really received before. So I thought that this was a fairness benefit. And when I was looking at Article 9, I was reassured because Article 9 says is basically a do no harm provision. Okay, it says that they're not going to do anything to hurt me. So, you know, when I read that letter through that context, I believed, oh, this is a good thing. You know, it's going to benefit me. My son's going to school in less than a year. I'm going to be in good shape, and this is a help. And it made sense. It lined up with what I saw in the marketing materials. It was a little less than I thought I was going to get, but it wasn't drastically less than I thought I was going to get.
Got it.
Spencer, maybe it helps if you sort of explain the benefits that were available to people. You know, there were minimum benefits. Who used minimum benefits? Was that even a thing? You know, there was the rollover benefit, and then there was the weighted average tuition. And if you could just explain that, I think, you know, I've heard so many different interpretations from the current crew that.
Sure, and one of the struggles that we had in our industry is that we had a lot of very busy working people with very limited time that would just call up and, you know, I need to know the value of my account. I need it right away. Well, number one, there's so many different values. There's the value if we distribute it to the college, that's the intended benefit. If you purchase a year of tuition for $10,000 for a kindergartner and College Park is $16,000 a year, that's your benefit. The $6,000 difference would be your earnings or your rate of return. The minimum benefit from the time I started until the time almost before I left was only applicable in situations where, one, the account holder paid more for her or his semester than the college is charging, and that they wanted to use the additional funds. Say, as an example, let's go back to that scenario where a person had paid $10,000 for a year. That's $5,000 a semester. If the student was going to Salisbury and the tuition was $4,200 a year, they would have lost $800 on that investment. So the minimum benefit assures the customer that she or he would get the $800 difference plus at reasonable rate of return that you're seeing, which is based on the government security minus 1.2%, whatever the actual definition is. That is the only time minimum benefits was even came into play, when, you know, in essence, someone paid more to us than we were due to pay to the college. And unfortunately, and a bane of my existence there, is that the minimum benefit was zero for the majority of my tenure there, which basically meant that that person would have gotten their $800, but the minimum benefit calculation often was zero. So they, in essence, were getting back exactly what they paid for. They did get the benefit of the $2,500 a year Maryland state income deduction, which helps lower your taxable income. That's always a nice thing. But in terms of investment returns, the minimum benefit was supposed to give them a couple of $100 additional on top of that $5,000, just so that they did a little bit better than breaking even. But I'm not sure why, if it was due to something the federal government was doing or due to the way it was calculated. All that was way over my head because I was not the money person. But that's the only time minimum benefits were in play. If you were to remove the money from the fund, one of two ways, either a refund or a rollover. Refund is where you're basically canceling the account and just getting the check with the tax penalties. A rollover is a tax-free transition from one 529 plan to the other. Contrary to popular belief, the Maryland Prepaid College Trust is a 529. I hear all over the place that it is not. It's a trust or it's a guaranteed program. It is not. It's an investment. The only difference is when you have your individual investment plan, you can log on and see how much you put in and what it's worth. The prepaid trust commingles all of those 30,000 account holders monthly or yearly or lump sum payments into one big investment pool, which is why it's so complicated to determine someone's value. But back to what happens with a refund or rollover, it has always been based on what we, the trust, had earned with your contributions. This minimum benefit calculation never had anything to do with a refund or a rollover. And you know, I don't care how, you know, you explain the math to me, it is absolutely 100% shortchanging the account holders, not out of what they were told they were going to get for the entire time they were members of the program, but it's also significantly less money. You know, I've read the thread of the group, and I've seen, you know, people's values being maybe only a couple hundred or a couple $1,000s more than their principal with these new calculations, where in the past, sometimes it was as much as double their principal based on the fact that we had done very well with our earnings. Other than 2 years of existence where the market provided us a negative rate of return, we've always been at or over our earnings goal, which the fund is designed to try to compete with what we assume tuition would increase. One of the problems with the program, and this is no fault of any past or present Maryland 529 employee, is that tuition stopped increasing after those huge increases in Governor Ehrlich's administration after 9/11. People saw College Park and other Maryland schools rise 15, 16% in the early 2000s. That's when so many people jumped in the program. And part of the issue is that we did better with our investments than we predicted, and tuition increases were significantly less than was predicted. So that left us in a situation where we had exceeded our earnings goals. And again, a lot of people did the rollover because it just made sense. If you're only getting your money back or just $100 more, why wouldn't you take advantage of the benefit of getting your money out with 100% of our earnings and no tax penalty? And that's the way we've been doing it, again, up until, right before I resigned.
And so those FAFSA documents that everyone got, that really, at the very bottom of them, they say, this is the refund value or the rollover value, and they kind of matched what you're saying. They matched the trust returns.
The FAFSA value is always very confusing because in defense of the agency, FAFSA themselves made some changes. It used to be that the prepaid was treated more negatively in that they used a prorated. They tried to assume what 4 years of tuition would be worth and apply the worst case scenario. Then they changed it to the account value, which was a loophole for our agency, because when you logged on to your Maryland prepaid college trust account online, your account value always showed as just what you paid in, because it was, I don't want to say it was impossible, but it was incredibly difficult to calculate each individual account holder's earnings and losses on their unique account, because everybody started at different times, everybody paid different payment options. So for the longest time, we were just telling people to report to FAFSA your account value, which was incorrect. So it was basically misreporting, because of course the assumption is what your account value is a lot more than just your principal payments. Then they changed it to the refund value, which, as you know, includes fees, earnings, losses. And that was a calculation that for many years took sometimes months to produce, because it had to be done manually. If you weren't formally requesting a refund but needed to know the amount for FAFSA, it would take a while. And you're sitting there online trying to fill out your FAFSA forms. You need it right then and there. So there was always a lot of issues. And another issue you mentioned with the incorrect 1099s, that was another thing that plagued us because of slow processing of benefits or errors. We had a lot of, and of course they were quick to blame that on T. Rowe Price, because they were sending out the 1099 Qs for both the investment plan and the prepaid. So they were always very quick to dismiss any errors from the prepaid and just conveniently, well, that's T. Rowe Price's problem, not ours. But I know reporting incorrectly to FAFSA and having incorrect tax documents is something that the federal government, FAFSA, frowns on quite a bit.
Any other final questions? Brian, you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Spencer. I want to thank all the members of the press who came out and participated today. I think you asked excellent questions, and this is the information that we need to get out. understanding the detrimental harm and how that has impacted us. And I think that as you've seen, Spencer has a great lens into the history there. I do also want to thank the members of the General Assembly and their staff, the members of the administration in Annapolis who are with us today. If you have anything that you want to say, please feel free to raise your hand. I know that the reason why you're here is to listen. Your job is to protect your constituents like me. I want to thank you for being present here today, because I think that hearing this directly from Spencer helps your deliberative process as you're looking at the bill in the Senate and the bill in the House. Again, thank you everyone for coming today. I'm going to conclude the recording and then close the room unless anyone has any other comments.